Thanks, Helen, for the overview and context. And in this next little session, what I'm going to try to do is do a little bit of a demonstration of some of the functionality of FBIS and show you just a few of the workflows that illustrate some of that functionality and some of the power and use cases for the system. So the aim of this isn't to show you everything, but rather to give you a relatively short demo that can hopefully stimulate some discussion afterwards. So as Helen's already shown you, the homepage of the platform looks something like this, where there's a breakdown of biodiversity records that are currently served on the system. And then right at the bottom of sorry, I'm just trying to move things around a bit here. Right at the bottom, there's also a few quite useful links as well. And I just wanted to point out one of them, which is citation here. And that just takes you to a page that gives you some information about the data that are being served on the platform, about data access, and about how to actually cite the data from the system if that's needed. So then back to the home page, and this is what a new user would see. So you'd be able to sign up before you explore the map, but I'm already signed up, so I'll just log in here. And the login takes us to a screen that should be familiar. Helen's just showed you, and this is really the map interface. The user interface of FBIS really centers around the map of South Africa, and the rivers are automatically loaded, which would make sense because it's a platform for river data in South Africa. So Helen gave you quite a nice overview of some of the functionality in this bar on the left here, but I just wanted to point out a few other things before diving into some examples. There are a few tabs at the top here which might be quite useful for users. One of them is an About tab, and that just takes you to a page that explains really where this platform came from, how it was built, who was involved in the development, and who are the partners and funders on the project. There's the map, of course, and a contact page for getting in touch with people at the FBIS. And then the next page I wanted to point out was the help page. And importantly here, we have a full technical manual for the most recent version of the platform. And that can be downloaded as a PDF, and that's really got all the nitty-gritty of the functionality on the system. But we've also packaged it as a series of YouTube tutorials looking at some of those really cover some of the main functionality of the platform, and also some demonstrations of some of the different use cases as well. So yeah, that's all in the help tab at the top. And you've got your profile that you can adjust things on. And then the last tab, just I wanted to draw your attention to, is there's a add a site tab. So this is just a shortcut to quickly and easily add a new site, which is one of the most common things that people do on FBIS. All right, so back to the map. A lot of the power and functionality of the platform actually falls within this little magnifying glass, which is the search bar here. And this is where you can apply filters to the data. And you can, in the search bar here, you can search by a few different things. You can search by river name, or by site name, or by the scientific name of a species of interest. And maybe before actually doing a search, I'll just show you show you all around what filters are available here to give you a feel for the extent of the flexibility. So the first little drawer that we have here that you can open, each of these we call them little drawers, and they have contents inside them. And in here you can see the different data modules. And yeah, we started off, as Helen mentioned, with the fish and the invertebrates and the algae. We've recently collaborated with Odonata Map to bring in adult odonate data, and hopefully there'll be a few more coming soon. And there are also abiotic companion data as well for some of the sites. Helen mentioned that there's also the option to include data from GBIF. The default is just FBIS data, and it's quite nice to have little snippets of information about these different filters and data sets. So here you can see it's telling us that the default is just FBIS data, which are data that are not necessarily available by a GBIF. And these are data that have been collated from reliable sources like peer-reviewed articles and published databases, as well as unpublished data, other reports. And so it's quite a rich data set here. But of course, if you turn on GBIF data as well, you'll see that the number of data points shown on the map will increase. I'll turn that off for now. You can specify whether your data query should include only data that have already been validated. So those are data that have been submitted to the platform and experts have looked at those and validated them, or you might want to include non-validated data as well, which might be newer data that haven't been looked at yet by the experts. And then another option is SAS accreditation, and SAS is it's an index, like Helen mentioned it earlier, and for those of you that don't know, it's a bioindex, and it's really a tool that uses biodiversity data to estimate the health of a river ecosystem based on invertebrate data. And it's a national tool that's used all over the country to try and keep tabs on the health or the state of our river ecosystems. And as such, there's an accreditation process. And so you can select data from only people who have been SAS accredited, so that, or all SAS data. So that can influence maybe the reliability of the data. All right, you can filter the data temporally. And what I like about this is you can filter by years, but you can also filter by months. So here in the Western Cape, our summer is really kicks off in November and goes through to about March. So I could specify what slice of the data I want, not only by year, but also by season, which is quite nice. Next, we have a set of spatial filters. Some of these are related to management layers, such as critical biodiversity layers or strategic water source areas. And others are more just typical spatial geographical type layers or political layers. So we've got provinces and we've got geomorphological zones of rivers. And again, these are arranged hierarchically. So in geomorphological zones, you can actually really drill down and tell the system which geomorphological zone you want your data returned for. And yeah, the same applies for which province you want the data returned for, etc. You can also filter the data by SAS. Again, so this is the biomonitoring tool widely used in South Africa. And here you have an option to query data from different levels of river ecological condition. So you might be looking for only sites that are that have been assessed to be as in a natural condition. So then you would just check the natural box. And then there's two important filters down here, and that's origin and endemism. So we have a lot of non-native freshwater species in South Africa. So there's an option here to either include or exclude those. And when filtering for native species, you can actually drill down into the different levels of endemism, of which there are quite a few. And again, within this search bar, every time you hover over a label, there's a brief explanation of what that label means. So microendemic level 2 means that you're filtering for taxa that are unique to a single river. So the endemism is all packaged in this drawer here. Conservation status gives you the chance to filter the data based on the IUCN Red List categories. And we have a lot of listed taxa, but we also have a lot of unlisted taxa in South Africa. And that's one of the things that I think is that hopefully will be addressed over the next decade or so, adding to that. And then you can also filter by the different the different places that data have come into the system from, the different kinds of references. Perhaps you may only be interested in data that have been brought in from peer-reviewed scientific articles, or you may be happy to include in your search unpublished data as well. You can filter for data from a specific study reference. If I type in Helen's name in here, okay, I don't know why that's not working right now. Anyway, yeah, you can filter by a specific study reference, and you can also filter by any of the users who have signed up to FBIS, or any of the data owners who have data sets associated with FBIS, whether it's yourself or someone else. All right. And on the search bar, an interesting thing to note is that this little reset button will always just reset the search before doing a new search, reset any filters that you've applied to the data previously. So I'm going to now do a search for, walk you through a search for one species. So we call this the taxon search. And in my case, someone who's quite interested in fish, I'm going to search for a freshwater fish called the Clan-William yellowfish, whose name is the Labiobarbus sieberi. So that actually, the search bar auto-populates with the name as soon as after I've entered the first few letters or any few letters in that name. And then I hit the search and it returns to me that there are 300 records on FBIS for the species, and the map automatically shows the location of the data points. You can see these fish are all here on the in the Olifantsdoring River catchment on the west coast of South Africa, which is exactly what I would expect. And there are a few things that you can actually do straight away here. Is by clicking this drop down, you can get some basic information on the sites, and you can sort those sites based on how many occurrences, species occurrences they have, or how many times the sites have been visited. And then you can also have a closer look at the taxon itself. And to do that, you can click on the Taxon Overview tab. And that takes you to this overview panel, which gives you a quick overview of the species, tells you about the number of records, the number of sites, it tells you its full scientific name, and it gives you some basic information on origin. It's a native species. Endemism, it's a regional endemic level 1, so it's endemic to a single catchment area, the Olifantsdoring. Its conservation status is near threatened, and then in this case, there are some images and even a little video here associated with that species. And then if you want to drill down more into the species and the data associated with it, you can actually go into the detailed dashboard, and I'll walk you through that. Starting off on the left here, we again just have the map showing the occurrence data for that species. And every time you see one of these little orange squares with an arrow, that means you can download an image of that which might be useful to include in a report. There's some basic information about the species and its records, and as well about its taxonomy, its full taxonomy. And then over on the right here, there's a list of all the occurrences, the rivers where the species was recorded, and also the number of occurrences in each river. The data are shown over time, so you can see since the earliest records for the species in 1979, there's been periods of more and less records being collected right up to present day. Again, the origin, endemism, and conservation status overview, the images a bit bigger in this dashboard, and the metadata table, which Helen showed you earlier, but I just wanted to point out a few more things here. This is something that was a top user requirement, identified as an important user requirement in the early stages of the project. So this is something that quite a lot of effort has gone into, and this really is a list of all the sources of all the data that are being returned in the query. So you can see, in this case, there are databases, there are peer-reviewed scientific journals, as well as published reports or theses. And there's information about these different references, but there's also ways to access them as well. So in the cases of papers, there's DOI links, and in some cases, you can even download the reports directly from FBIS. All right, so that's a quick look at a search for a single taxon. The next search I'll show you is for what we call a multi-site search, but it's really the kind of search you would do if you're interested in all the data from a particular area. And in this case, I'm going to do a query for all the data for the During River catchment. And the way I would do that would be to actually start writing in the name of the river that I'm interested in here. And you can see here, the During River comes up. So by searching for that, it shows me that there's 1,164 records from the During River. And you can see here the spread of the data. So I know that the During River is this one over here, but there's also a few other data points in different catchments. And one of the reasons for that might be that the During River is quite a popular name for rivers in South Africa. It means the thorny river, lots of acacia thorn trees on lots of our rivers. So there's probably are multiple During Rivers. So what you can do then is you can actually zoom in, and we've added a tool here which is quite similar to what was one of the tools that was shown 2 weeks back on ARCOS, which is going in and actually manually drawing a polygon around the data that covers the distribution that you're interested in. And I know that these are the data points for the During River. So I can update my search according to that polygon, and that way I can really hone in on the sites that I'm interested in the During River. So I can do my sites overview here, and I will ask the platform to filter again my occurrences from high to low for that selection, and I can see here which sites have the most occurrences, which sites have the most visits. If I hit Sites Overview, it then gives me a quick overview of the data from these sites that I've selected in the During River. And it tells me my filter history. So in this case, it's a very simple filter history. I just said, please return the data for one river. But if you're applying multiple filters, that's when this filter history gets quite useful. And here you get a visual quick breakdown of the data for the different the different taxonomic groups visualized for the proportions of taxa that are fall in different categories for origin, endemism, conservation status, and also the number of taxa. As a fishy guy, I'm happy to see here that there are 9 different taxa recorded in the Doing River. And then I can drill down into any one of the more detailed dashboards for the multi-site data for one of these taxonomic groups. So I'll go down into the fish dashboard, and here it really shows we're starting to get to some of the really really cool functionality of the platform, which is this idea of being able to track data and change over time. What we see on the left here to start off with is some basic information about the search query, the data records, and all the details of the and attributes of the data that are being displayed. There's a table which gives you information for all the individual site records, the site codes, where the records came from, and then a table showing all of the data occurrence records. And these can be downloaded as a CSV file as well, and can be analyzed further that way. And I'm not going to show you that, but I just wanted to point out that that is really the finest level of detail, of data detail you can get from the platform. In that CSV file, you will not only have the taxon, the occurrences, and these categories of origin, endemism, and conservation status, but you'll also get lots of other information. For example, associated abiotic data, information about sampling methods and sampling efforts, and a lot of different attributes that add a lot of value to the occurrence data that we see here in the dashboard. At the top, visually, again, an overview of the occurrence data. So these fish in the Doing River were actually dominated by non-native species, a range of different endemism categories. Most of the fish records were for species of least concern, but there were also some of near threatened and even endangered species. You can see that a range of different sampling methods were used to collect the data from this river, and that the fish data were collected from a range of different biotypes. The occurrences data over time show that the data collection here in this river started about 40 years ago, with a real peak in the early 2000s, perhaps linked to our river health program. And you can also see that there have been changes in the species composition of this river over time based on the available data. The same graph can be visualized differently as native and non-native species. And if you're only interested in what's in non-native species records in this river over time, then you can just turn off the native species data and save your graph that way. Similar plots showing endemism categories and conservation categories over time. And then again, our metadata table giving us the sources of all the data displayed in the charts. All right. So I'm going to reset my search and walk you through one more search. This time we're going to focus on some invertebrate data. And for this, I'm going to go into the filters, and I'm going to specify that I'm specifically interested in invertebrate data only. I'm going to apply a temporal filter. So I'm going to specify that I'm interested particularly in data that have been collected over the last 20 years or so. And then I'm going to spatially focus in on just one of the provinces in South Africa. In this case, it's going to be the Western Cape province. And I'll check that. And then if I hit search, based on those filters, it will return the occurrence records for invertebrates in the Western Cape province since the year 2000. nearly 60,000 such records. And the filters, the spatial filters, are shown quite clearly with this red outline on the map. Can again look at the sites, and I can see here sites ranked by how many data occurrences there have been and how many site visits there have been. So I'll have a closer look at this site, which has the most site visits in this province. So I can click on that. And then what we can actually do now is, from this overview dashboard, again, drill down to get a more detailed look at the data. And in this case, I'm actually going to look at the SAS data. So just reminding you, this is the bioindicator tool for assessing river health. It's derived from the raw invertebrate biodiversity data. And if we drill down into that SAS dashboard, that's when we can really start to get a closer look at these data. And again, this is where the power of FBIS really becomes quite apparent. You can start to visualize these changes in river health score and how healthy the ecosystem is over time. It's particularly powerful in situations where sites have been visited again and again, have a long data history. And again, on the left here of the dashboard, there's basic information about the site, some context for the site, and both spatially and in terms of management layers. And then the dashboard goes into some more details about the actual SAS results from this site. And yeah, these are visualized over time in different ways. And I'm not going to go into the details of these, but mostly just to say that the SAS dashboards have been designed in such a way that hopefully mimic the way that data are recorded in the field, and the visualizations, the graphs that are provided here are hopefully the kinds of things that are going to be really useful to just download and include in reports, in this case, to show how this site on the river has changed in terms of its ecological health over time. In this case, there's also quite a wealth of abiotic data associated with the site, which comes up automatically. And again, these data can be downloaded as a CSV or visually as graphs. And finally, there are, again, the metadata, if you scroll right down to the bottom, available as well. Okay, so I'm going to go back to the map, and that's really all of the searching, the data query workflows that I want to show you today. The last thing I want to show you is how to add data to a site. There's a few different ways you can add a site, but one of the easiest ways is to actually just hit the Add Site button. And that takes you to a screen where you can add a new site, either by actually clicking on the map or by entering the coordinates of the site as you've recorded it in the field. So I'm actually not going to create a new site. I'm going to go and add data to an existing site. And I'm going to zoom in here on the Cape Peninsula, which is where the Freshwater Research Center is based, for those that you don't know it. A useful tip here is just to use the shift and scroll to zoom in, or you can also use the little plus and minus buttons right at the top of the search bar. So we are here in a place called Kommetjie on the Cape Peninsula, right in the southwest of South Africa. And as this loads, you'll be able to see that our offices are actually in this little area here. We're surrounded by quite a few interesting features, some wetlands, a school, some really good surf spots close to work, which I like, the ocean, and also some rivers flowing right past our offices as well. And this river here is called the Bokramspruit. I'll zoom in on that a little bit more. And you can see the river name isn't showing at the moment. So this is something that we're busy working on the platform at the moment, is making sure that the river name shows at all times, so you know what river you're dealing with. I'm sure all of you working on information systems like this can relate to these kind of things that you're always trying to fix and always trying to figure out. And this is one of the things we're busy working on. But you'll have to take my word for it that this is the Bokram-Spruit River. So if I wanted to maybe at lunchtime walk out of the offices and go down to the river and sample it right here where Komaki Road crosses the river, I can see someone's already sampled it there. So I can click on that site. I can see what information already exists for that site. And I could add my data directly to that site using the add button. And that takes you to the form for adding, in my case, fish data. The first thing you need to just fill out is when the data was collected, in this case, today. And then you can enter information about the way the sampling was done, which biotope the sample was collected from, etc. Importantly, my sampling used a SANNet, quite a common sampling method, and there's different ways to specify your sampling efforts. So in this case, maybe it was by time, and I sampled for, let's say, it was my lunch break, so quite a short sample, 15 minutes, and you have an option to upload an image file as well. Next is to tell the platform which species you sampled, and what's quite nifty here is it auto-populates a list of species that have been recorded nearby. So you can scroll down, and in my case, I can see, okay, this is the one, Galaxius abratus, and I recorded 5 of them during my sampling, and that was the only species. The next step is to check the box that you agree to the data being shared on FBIS. You submit that record, and then you're confronted with the next page, which is really for adding abiotic data. So this is in cases where you've measured other information alongside the biodiversity data, whether it be things like the width of the river, the physicochemistry, and there's quite an exhaustive list here. We've tried to include all the different possible abiotic parameters that someone might collect alongside biotic data. And when downloading CSV files of biodiversity data, these are the kinds of parameters that will be served up in your CSV file alongside the biotic data for further analysis. So I'm going to go to the next screen. I didn't collect any abiotic data. And what kind of reference is this for? Well, this is for a database. And in this case, it's part of our FRC monitoring database, but every organization can potentially add a database here. And any notes associated with these data, you can then submit that. And then that record is then sent to the experts, the relevant experts, in this case, the fish expert, and waited, and then now it's waiting to be validated. And once validated, it'll go into the validated category, but it will also automatically appear on the map. So that's how to add data to a site in a nutshell. And that's really it from me. The last thing I wanted to say was just that if you're interested in looking at more of the workflows that are available and reading up more about some of the details of the filtering and the functionality and the different layers, then you can go into this help panel here that I showed you earlier. You can download the manual. You can watch the tutorials on whatever workflow you might be interested in. And yep, it's all available at any time up on the site. So that's it from me. And I'm going to now hand over to Tim to talk a little bit about the technical dimension of the platform before we go into a more general discussion.